Ladies and gentlemen, in this RedGameIntent.com video, we're going to be discussing once again used games and always online requirements of the Xbox One. This time, however, Cliff Blazensky from former Epic Games and currently, of course, one of the most recognizable faces in terms of Xbox game development. Obviously, he's behind the Gears of War franchise, speaks out about used games as well. And we also have some various other comments from people in the industry, so this one's going to be a fairly interesting look. So I think we've covered a lot of this stuff in terms of the arguments for and against, but there are a hell of a lot more seemingly to come forward. Don Matrick, who serves as Microsoft President of Company Interactive Entertainment Business, was speaking in a recent interview. And he's been basically defending Microsoft's stance, as you'd expect. And anyway, I'm going to read you guys out some quotes, and then we can go from there. Absolutely. It's a super passionate community of people. He was just asked, by the way, if he expected this level of opposition with the stance that Microsoft are taking. And anyway, he said, absolutely, it's a super passionate community of people. It's very important to them, and they are opinionated and they are smart. So they look at things and they say, hey, is this going to impact me in a negative way? Until you use it, it's really hard to understand what all the advantages are. It's a service-based world. If you think about things and how to get better with internet connection, and that's a design choice that we made. I think people will appreciate it. It's something that when people experience it, it's easier than having people like me describe, but it really is powerful. We did a lot of research and consumer testing, and I think we made a good choice. He continued forward and he said that I think people are going to love it, and then they're going to understand what we're trying to create and how it links to games and entertainment and functionality of the box. Some of the advantages you get by having a box that's designed to use it in an online state. To me, it's a future-proof choice, and I think people could have arguably gone the other way if we didn't do it. Fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to have some form of connectivity. It's called the Xbox 360, and if you have zero access to the internet, that's an offline device. Seriously, when I read the blogs and thoughts about who's really most impacted, there was a person who said they're on a nuclear sub. I don't even know what it means to be on a nuclear sub, but I've got to imagine that it's not easy to get an internet connection. I can empathise. If I was on the sub, I'd be disappointed. Meanwhile, Phil Spencer, who acts as the corporate vice president of Microsoft Studios, was speaking in yet a different interview, and he stated the Xbox 360 ecosystem is a great ecosystem for someone that's purely disconnected state for a long periods of time. We've built a relatively natively connected device for Xbox One, and we think the experiences are moving in that direction. As if trying to smooth things over, he also stated, if you look at the bandwidth requirements with this authentication, it's fairly small. So if you think about something you've downloaded and you want to go play, the bandwidth requirements are not going to be an issue. We understand what internet is. We've built fault tolerances into our system like we have with Live in our past. We'll continue that. That's why we built this Windows in, because we understand things happen and my internet might go down. I'm in a metered system and I want to make sure that I'm monitoring it, my use of the internet with built-in support of those type of ecosystems completely. End quote. Okay, so before we tackle quotes from other people, let's talk about these two guys. So, the first one that really hurt my head when I was reading it was, we've got a system already in place for you guys who don't have a stable internet connection. It's called the Xbox 360. That, I don't even know what to say to that. Okay, I'm Sony and I read that quote. I would want to send that guy a bouquet of flowers in happiness, because that quote can be twisted so many different ways. You could basically have fun with it until the cows come home. Think about what he's saying. I mean, admittedly, he did say this somewhat in jest, okay? But first of all, people are pissed about it, so don't joke about it, because that's not really going to endear yourself to customers. And if you're not joking about it and you're serious, that's just as bad. Because what you're basically saying is, okay, we have this older console, right? It's about 7 years older, but you can play that. All your friends in various other states or areas could play on the Xbox One with all the new shiny games, and I'm sure you'll be happy with that, right? Right? Meanwhile, Sony are going to be saying, oh, by the way, guys, we've got a new system. It's actually cheaper. You don't need an internet connection, and you don't need to worry about DRM and stuff. And did I mention it's cheaper? So, yeah. That is not a very good quote to be leading with. Okay, so let's talk about the advantages for a moment, in a serious note, because I'm being a bit quippy here, if you will. I'm allowed to be, I'm British, so I can be sarcastic. In fact, you're bloody well expecting me to be sarcastic. But, be honest, it does have some advantages, this system, and I'm not taking the piss here. One of the things I do like about it is the fact that you can lend games to people, up to 10 people, you can have them on a list. Now, that's not a huge advantage to me. That's like, oh, it's nice, okay? In other words, you can choose up to 10 other people to be able to play your games. Now, obviously, there are some constraints on this. Specifically, developers could opt out, or should I say publishers could opt out. Secondly, the big one, of course, that you can't all play at once. But still, it's nice, and I have a feeling that it could well be abused somewhat if Microsoft don't police it somehow or another. The problem is, despite all of these advantages, despite all of these disadvantages, right, we can cite them until the cows come home, people are still not happy. Now, before we continue on my analysis, let's talk a little bit about Cliff. Now, as I said, he's backing the anti-used game DRM. And I'm going to read you guys out a quote, and then we'll tackle that as well. You cannot have a game and marketing budget this high while also having used and rental games existing. The numbers do not work, people. The visual fidelity and future sets we expect from games now come with a sky-high cost. Assassin's Creed games are made by thousands of devs. Newsflash, this is why you're seeing free-to-play and microtransactions everywhere. The disc-based day one $60 model is crumbling. Those of you telling me, then just lower the game budgets, do not understand how silly you sound, right? If you can afford high-speed internet and you can't get it where you live, then direct your rage at who is responsible for pipe blocking you. Okay. Right, before we comment on that, because I know, I keep putting it off, but hear me out, there's a lot of stuff. Now, obviously, everyone right now is weighing in their opinions, and that ranges from people like me, who obviously run a YouTube channel, website, and so forth, down to you guys, who are, viewers and customers, okay? Who ultimately, by the way, are the most important. I'll just be blunt. Why are you the most important? Because I am not buying your console for you. They are not buying your console for you. You are the one that is buying that console. You are the one that is buying the games for that console. Therefore, you are voting and saying, okay, this is what I believe, okay? Then, of course, you've got people who are in the industry. Now, I'm not talking about Microsoft, I'm not talking about Sony, and even Nintendo to a degree, because they do have vested interests, okay? Obviously, Sony are not going to say, well, I could see kind of where they're coming from on this. Okay, well, gee whiz, have fun, guys. They're, of course, going to criticize it until the cows come home, because it's marketing, it's PR stunts, okay? That's fine, I have no problem with it. It's been there since the dawn of business. But we have people such as, well, pretty much anyone in the indie scene specifically, but any game designers, any game developers, any publishers are weighing in as well, because it's a very, very, very hot topic. And I know I could basically create 15 videos a day for at least a week on all of the different ins and outs on this. And I honestly would not run out of topics or quotes, because there are so many of them. But I want to try and touch on some of them now. Let's talk about what Nintendo's stance is. Now, we've spoken about Shigeru Miyamoto and his opinions, and to be honest with you, he has very similar opinions to other developers as well, including Take-Two Interactive. Now, their opinions are this. And we could be talking about various developers here, and I'm going to condense it, concatenate it, because otherwise we will be here for a long ass time on this video, and it's already going to become fairly lengthy. But their philosophy is, look, create a game that is going to have lasting appeal. Now, you can do this a couple of ways. They're basically saying, one, you create a really good game that is multiplayer. Now, multiplayer obviously will entice people to continue to play it long after it is released. Now, obviously, people will eventually get bored of that, so that's where, well, DLC comes in. The second option for single-player games, like, for example, Skyrim, which of course sold extremely well, and other titles like Dark Souls or basically single-player focused games such as Mario, they are basically saying, and by the way, there's also been news that they are considering DLC for something like Zelda. They're basically saying, okay, we will create a single-player game, and then soon after it's released, just when we think people are going to start getting bored with it, say 2 to 3 months later, we'll start releasing DLC, and that DLC is going to be either free or well-priced and very good. In other words, it's not going to be a costume pack, yeah? We're talking about stuff that is going to be something that you will want to continue to play, and that's the important thing, because if you don't want to play it, you'll sell it. Now, there is no getting around that the prices of creating games is going up. I could actually create a video specifically on this, but for now we'll just say that it is going up and leave it from there. It's going up drastically. You guys could Google this for now, but I will be putting out a video on this in the next couple of days because I think it's a very interesting topic. I don't care what your opinion is, but this is a reality, right? The development costs are going up. Why? Because games are becoming more complicated. And that's why a lot of people now are focusing on multi-platform releases. Because, quite simply, you need to make as much money back as possible. And so the minimum threshold for games, in other words, the minimum amount of games that need to be sold, for example, let's say back in the day, it was like 10,000 to break even. Now it might be 50,000 to break even, just as a pure example. The reason, of course, is because production costs go up. And similarly, our customer values also going up, what we want. Now, as Cliff said, you can't just suddenly say, well, the blockbuster games now are going to have half the production value and, you know, that's it. Because would you buy them? Would you suddenly say, okay, well, the next generation's out, and gee whiz, awesome. Okay, we're going to stick with this level of graphics for the next 6 years. That's not going to work. That's not even possible. It's not feasible. We want bigger worlds. We want better environments, and there is no getting away from it, people. Used games take away from, well, their profits. It's that simple. Simple as that. And the same thing for renting games and borrowing them from friends and all of the other jazz. But I've been really vocal on this. I don't like used games. There's multiple reasons I don't like used games, and I won't bore you guys with all of them because I've told you about them before, but primarily I think they're a rip-off for the customer, and I think it gyps, well, the studios as well. It's that simple. Like today, I went into a store. Might as well mention I went to a supermarket and I bought The Last of Us. Okay, I didn't pre-order it. I was really naughty, and I managed to snag the last copy that was on the shelf. And it cost me, what was it? let's see, I've got the receipt right next to me. £38. And okay, that's a new game, right? That's The Last of Us new game release. Blah blah blah. It's a standard edition. Okay, I now have this title. I could have gone in maybe 3 days, 4 days time, and I could have probably picked up used for 32, right? Just for example, but what's that going to do? It's not a significant saving, and once again, just to reiterate, I don't like supporting that business model. The problem is that everyone has a different opinion, okay? I can't tell you with a straight face that the Xbox One is perfect. I cannot, however, tell you with a straight face that there are problems with the Xbox One. I cannot also tell you that the Xbox One is the best thing ever. Why? Because my needs, my desires, my gameplay habits are completely different to that of yours. But here are my concerns with Microsoft. It's not the no-use game thing, okay? That pisses me off a little bit, but it's not that big a deal, alright? It's mostly from things such as me being able to take a game around a friend's house and just the freedom of stuff like that. That's really what bugs me. I'll give you guys a perfect example. When I was younger, I used to stay around friends' house for, a day or two, and we used to all bring round games, and we would have like game parties and play, whatever really, and it would be like, really cool. And sometimes we'd take like a multi-tap round, and we'd play like SmackDown, for example, on the PlayStation. And other times we'd all be playing on different screens. And there's one time we set up like 3 systems, and we're all playing. Oh, what the hell were we playing? I think it was Resident Evil, and it was really awesome. And it's just easy, but obviously it's becoming more of a connected world now. Microsoft are very, 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 very keen, and yes, I said very that amount of times deliberately, but they're very keen to keep reminding us that it is a service-based world. The problem is, while they can echo this until the cows come home, while I even somewhat agree with them, while yes, if you don't have an internet connection now, you're probably in the minority, and I'm talking about the good internet connections, because reliable internet connections are becoming more and more mainstream. I mean, as I've said, I personally have a 120 megabyte connection. However, I know people with 10 MB connections, right? But still, they have an internet connection that is reliable and decent. I don't know that many people now with really crappy internet. But still, internet does go out and so forth. But here's the thing. It's just that extra level of restriction. And more to the point, people are rightfully saying that I do not get anything more from this. That is the problem, I think, that people are having. Microsoft is telling us all day long that you don't realize what extra levels of service there are. And they'll cite stuff like cloud. They'll cite stuff like, cloud computing, but we've already discussed. It can't be used for everything. That's the problem. So now you've got stuff like flexibility of taking a game. The problem is, the reason that Sony got such a huge round of applause, it's what is more flexible than me giving you a disc. Alright? Now, I can argue, and this is like a debate that Amata, myself, Spoonie, Kipper, and a couple others, because we're all playing Devil's Advocate at some point, and I'm really good at playing Devil's Advocate. And I said, well, okay, one of the reasons I do like this 10 game thing, you know what I'm talking about, right? Where you can have up to 10 people on your list that can play your games and blah, blah, blah. And I said, one of the reasons I do like that, let's say, for example, I'll use the United States because I'm sure more people are familiar with that than locations in the United Kingdom. So let's just assume I move several thousand miles and I'm living in the US, okay? And let's say I was to live in New York, because that's, well, why not? And let's say my friend Tom lives in Texas. I can't really just send him that game easily. And stuff like that, yes, that is nice. That is nice to be able to do. Even if he's like 100 miles away, let's say I live let's just say I live a stone's throw from London, right? But I have a friend who does live in London, Murasaki. And I can go up to visit him. I can take a train or whatever and go visit him. And it's actually a lot easier on a train, just in case you guys are wondering. But as it turns out, it's still not exactly easy, is it? I have to take a train, or I can put it in the post. Now, if I put it in the post, he's going to get it in a day or two, depending on how much money I spend on package and postage, of course. On the other hand, I could just lend him it via this. Now, that's good. That is great. That is fantastic. And I would say to Microsoft, I like that feature. I have no concerns with that feature. The problem is, when they're saying they don't realize the advantages, we're trying, Microsoft. But here's the problem. You continue to cite things such as Steam and Origin on the PC, right? The danger is you cannot do that, and I'll tell you why, because I can look, the July sales or June-July sales, which obviously, if you're used to PC gaming, you'll know that that's the Steam summer sales. They're going to be starting in the next month or two. And it's a simple case of those games are going to be going down to 75% in some cases. I honestly am scared for my wallet, and that is not me being flippant, that is me being goddamn honest. I am actually terrified for my wallet, because last time I said to myself there are not that many games I want to buy. I've bought pretty much everything. I won't spend that much in these summer sales. I ended up spending about £100 more than what I originally wanted to. And bear in mind that the games I was buying in most cases were £2 to £5. You can imagine how many games I actually bought. Right? There were the odd one I bought for over 10, but we're talking new releases here. And the problem is, if you're going to do that on the console, fine. That's great. Then, the used game thing, I think people would be less upset. But the problem is, you're telling us that there are all these advantages, but the reality is we don't see it. And this is the problem. Now, it's not a huge shock and horror that game prices are going up in terms of the production cost. And that is bad, because the problem is, I can 100% empathize with studios, because they always get yelled at, oh my god, not a cover-based shooter again. Oh my goodness, not another driving game. And this has been something that I've been reading a lot from E3, okay? I've read several websites, I'm not going to bother to mention the names because they're a plethora, but all of these different things, and they're saying, oh, E3, more of the same stuff, there's your innovative game here and there. The problem is, the reason they're going with these games is because they know that they're relatively safe, they'll appeal to a wide audience, and most likely they're going to sell well. And that's the thing, if you invest millions, if you're basically millions in the negative because you've sunk this money into this project, you need that game to flourish. This is simple economics, this is not hard to understand. And Cliff is 100% right in that fact. Studios need more, but the problem is, it's very conflicting, because there have been numerous studies that say that used games and piracy don't affect the music industry that much. Now, I'm not going to say that I am an industry analyst when it comes to stuff. I have not conducted the studies, but they are there, and I can only cite with what I've seen. And the problem is that you get Nintendo and so forth who are saying that they're not concerned with used games. Even EA have recently said, well, we're not really sure how we feel about used games, but we don't really have a problem with it because we feel, if you read between the lines, that we can make money from them anyway. And that's the real bottom line here. They feel that they can make money from you guys who are buying the used games. The problem is, the more Microsoft are defending themselves in this position, the more people want to say, well, what are the advantages? Because you keep reiterating that there are advantages. You keep telling us that, we're going to be really happy when we've bought it. The problem is, so you're telling us we have to spend, in the UK prices, £400 to buy this console so we can understand the advantages of it. Okay. Here's the thing, look at the pre-order numbers right now for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox. The Xbox One is getting smacked on the hammer, over the head with a hammer. There are memes going around the internet right now of the Xbox One saying RIP 2013 to 2013. That ain't good. And obviously, the Xbox One is not going to flunk completely because that is foolhardy. On the other hand, the problem is people don't want to spend £400 or $500 or whatever it is in your current currency to understand what the advantages are, because I don't see any. That's what they're saying. This is how we want to play. We do not want ourselves dictated to. And I'll tell you another thing that's really not helping Microsoft right now. And I've remained fairly quiet on it because it's a massive topic, and but the whole privacy concerns, which obviously I'm sure you guys are familiar with it, with the NSA and everything else, and well, that's going around the internet. There are more memes of that right now than what there are of cats. I think every time I turn on my Facebook feed or something, someone is commenting on that. Particularly, of course, the America kind of region. Obviously in the UK it's not so much of a big deal, but in the US it's really huge. And to be honest, Microsoft just had a really bad break with that, because with all the privacy concerns of the Xbox, and yes, they are saying that you can reduce this, you can turn off the Connect spy, and whatever else you want to say, but the problem is people are still really concerned about this crap. This is another issue, by the way, that Google Glasses are having as well, because people are really worried about just what privacy is being around. I mean, I'm someone that really hates the way even Facebook works with privacy, because I'll give you guys a really simple example. Just turning off the fact that I was in a location and I don't want myself tagged in those locations is more difficult than it needs to be. Alright, there are ways around it a lot of the time, but truthfully speaking, I shouldn't have to find ways around it. I shouldn't have to struggle for the privacy, especially on Facebook right now, because all the time I get asked, where do I work? Like, Facebook will regularly pop up questions like, where do I work? Where did I go to school? Where do I live? What am I doing with X? You know, and most of the reasons for this is because of advertising, and people are becoming increasingly aware of this and increasingly pissed off with this, if to be honest. Microsoft just happened to announce this at a poor time, and it's not their fault in that respect, because they didn't say, well, gee, you know what would be perfect for this whole, you know, this whole online privacy scandal to suddenly arise. No, I can imagine they are probably smacking their head against the wall internally, because obviously it is not ideal. But there are already comments that I've been seeing, and obviously it's ridiculous, but there are already ridiculous comments like Microsoft are shaking hands with, you know, spies and all of this so they can invade your privacy. And the problem is a lot of this right now is paranoia as well, and they're dealing a lot with this, but the primary issue is that they are saying stuff like, you know, we have a product to be able to facilitate those of you who have poor online connections. The problem is, no one in the right mind, I don't understand how, you know, even if they were being flippant or they were being serious, obviously they were being serious, because, you know, they weren't being flippant because that's just ridiculous. Obviously he was joking a little bit, but he was being serious. The thing is, they cannot say, well, actually, gee whiz, we've got nothing for you. Alright? He can't say to that guy who was in a nuclear submarine, and I don't know how accurate that was. In other words, I don't know if the guy really was in a nuclear submarine, but let's just assume he was. He cannot tell him, well, actually, guys, we've got nothing for you in this generation. You're pretty boned, so you might want to go with our rivals. He can't say that. But the problem is, you read between the lines, and that's pretty much what he's saying, because who honestly, let's say you're little Timmy, right, for Christmas, and your mum comes up to you, and she says, well, little Timmy, what would you like for Christmas? Well, I would like an Xbox One. And then, you know, I'd really like to play X, Y, and Z, Mum, but you know what? I can't, because our internet connection, because we live out, you know, in the sticks or whatever, and, you know, the internet goes out because of flooding or whatever, especially around the wintertime. And I know people, for example, in Sweden and other regions that have really, really bad weather. And it sometimes takes down the internet or whatever, sorry. And it's not their fault, you know. They have like 10, 15, you know, feet of snow or whatever in a couple of days. I'm obviously being a bit joking, but you get what I mean. They can't help that. Some service is going to go down. And so little Tim is going to say, well, I like an Xbox, but I don't want to risk my not being able to play my games for, you know, a week or whatever, or, you know, going out. So you know what? I'm going to go with the Xbox 360, Mom. Who's going to do that? They're going to obviously say, well, I'd like a PlayStation 4 because I'm not sure about an internet connection. And obviously I am joking a little bit here, and I'm, you know, being a bit funny for entertainment values, but you guys understand where I'm coming from here. It's not a good position to take in the interview because, I mean, people already commented on this over the internet, and I made a status of it on Red Gaming Tech Facebook, and people are already commenting and saying, I agree, I don't understand. People are saying that Microsoft are arrogant. The problem is, I don't necessarily know if they're being 100% arrogant. I just don't think they can market this any other way, because there are only so many ways you can say X, right? They have to defend their position. They have to make it sound like they are doing you a favor, because if not, they're taking the defensive. They can't take the defensive. They have to make it sound like it's a good product, because if they don't make it sound like a good product, if they don't make it sound like they are believing that they have done the right thing, well, who's going to go with them? And that's the problem. So right now we have a situation where battle lines are being drawn. Microsoft obviously does have supporters. Ironically enough, I actually do half agree with some of the stuff they are doing. I just have a problem with how they're going about some of it. And I don't know. It's just one of those situations where I think they've just been really unlucky with the timing with all of this piracy stuff. People are also becoming increasingly weary about this stuff as well. And people continue to ask, well, what am I getting that is better than my current situation where I could just lend a disc? And they're saying, well, you know, X, Y, and Z. But then people are saying, well, that's nice, that's a bonus, but it doesn't make me feel more free. It just makes me feel more restricted. And I don't know. It's going to be very interesting, especially as I said, the pre-orders for the Xbox One and PS4 were neck and neck. But now we've seen the stock price of Microsoft during the E3 announcement dropped and Sony's rose. I don't know what they are like now, but it certainly did do that. And I did post that photo on Red Gaming Tech as well. So if you guys are not sure about that, you can check it out. That's on facebook.com/redgamingtech. And you can see right there there's an discernible dip, and with stuff like that happening, gamers and everyone else are becoming increasingly sick of these situations because they just want to be able to play games. So we'll have to see. I've no doubt I'm going to be revisiting this. I actually said that yesterday, but I didn't think I'd be revisiting it within the space of 24 hours. I actually genuinely thought it was going to take a while, but then, of course, a slew of interviews popped out. Anyway, that is me done for this particular video. It's been fairly ranty and opinionated, I understand, but obviously we've had opinions from various developers and everyone else. As I said, there was a previous video of this yesterday, so some of the stuff that I skimmed over, including the stuff from Miyamoto, you guys can check that out in the previous video if you've not already seen it. If you have, then more power to you. Anyway, I am going to go, so hopefully you've enjoyed the video, and I will see you soon. Take care, and bye for now.